Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, meanwhile, may have already hijacked the agenda.
Alberta's oil directly supports more than 50 U.S.-based refineries with direct investment in more than 20 U.S. states and is essential to affordability, growth, economic prosperity, and energy security in the United States and globally. The government of Alberta's ambition is to double oil and gas production.
Alberta just bypassed Ottawa completely and struck a $20 billion pipeline deal that'll pump 1 million barrels daily straight to American refineries. While Trudeau's government has blocked over $500 billion in energy infrastructure, Premier Danielle Smith decided to stop asking for permission and start building her own economic empire.
We export 4.3 million barrels a day to the U.S. That's 56% of what the Americans import.
Alberta just locked in a massive pipeline deal with the USA. And honestly, it's about time someone called Ottawa's bluff.
Pipeline did not get shut down, which would have been devastating for the U.S.
Wait, did I just say Alberta is moving 1 million barrels per day without federal approval? Because that's exactly what's happening right now. Smith isn't playing politics anymore. She's playing hardball with a 42-inch steel pipeline that makes Keystone XL look like a garden hose.
Alberta oil and natural gas is also a reliable and important feedstock for essential products produced in the United States.
Think about this for a second. Alberta already ships 80% of its oil to the United States anyway. So why pretend Ottawa has any real say in this relationship? Smith just made it official, permanent, and way more profitable. The target destination? British Columbia's northwest coast, specifically Prince Rupert or Kitimat. Whichever port says yes faster.
Now, if you couple it with the 1 million barrel per day pipeline, well, that allows you $20 billion worth of revenue year after year after year.
Nobody seems to be talking about the sheer scale of what Alberta produces. We're looking at 4.2 million barrels daily, which translates to 1.5 billion barrels annually. That's more oil than most OPEC nations can dream of pumping. Yet somehow, Canada treats this resource like it's toxic waste instead of liquid gold worth $9 trillion sitting underground.
But at the same time, I think he is very open to resetting the relationship between Ottawa and Alberta.
Here's where it gets absolutely ridiculous. Over the past decade, Ottawa has systematically killed Northern Gateway, Energy East, and Keystone XL. If those projects were operational today, Alberta would be moving an additional 2.5 million barrels per day, generating $55 billion in extra GDP annually. But instead of celebrating this potential, federal bureaucrats threw a climate tantrum and torched $500 billion in economic opportunity.
I want to take him at his word that he wants to operate in good faith.
Meanwhile, Smith has been quietly building relationships that matter. She's been on direct calls with Doug Burgum and Dan Brulette, Trump's former energy secretary, discussing cross-border energy integration that completely sidelines Canadian federal involvement. Brulette didn't mince words when he mentioned reviving Keystone XL, the very project Biden killed because apparently Canadian oil became politically inconvenient overnight.
We can make so much progress just by getting the world to switch to the cleaner fuels that we produce here. So
smart move, considering the United States desperately needs reliable energy partners. American refineries are already perfectly configured for heavy Canadian crude, and guess what? They're not getting that oil from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia anymore. Smith recognized this opening and jumped on it faster than Ottawa could form another consultation committee.
An early assessment of additional Indigenous opportunities and how the Alberta Indigenous Opportunity Corporation could participate in the opportunities advanced by the working group. Increasingly, Alberta's ability to move more oil and gas.
Indigenous communities aren't being tokenized in this deal either, which honestly surprises me given how these projects usually unfold. Smith locked in $750 million in real equity stakes, not symbolic positions or photo opportunities. We're talking about actual ownership shares that scale up to $3 billion as the project expands. These communities become business partners, not just bystanders watching pipelines cross their territories.
I've also seen it dissipate when Ottawa addresses the legitimate concerns Alberta has.
Compare that approach to Ottawa's reconciliation theater. The federal government loves making speeches about inclusion, while Indigenous communities file lawsuits because they're excluded from actual decision-making. Smith flipped the script entirely. Instead of fighting over land use, these nations profit from energy development. Revolutionary concept, apparently.
Alberta oil and natural gas is also a reliable and important feedstock for essential products produced in the United States, especially in the Midwest states of Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Energy corridors represent the future of Canadian resource development, whether Ottawa admits it or not. This isn't just one pipeline anymore. Smith is building an entire network stretching from Alberta to Prince Rupert, extending to Churchill, Manitoba, and connecting directly to Asian and European markets. Alberta is going global while the rest of Canada debates whether pipelines hurt feelings.
Saskatchewan and Alberta just dropped a nuclear announcement that could literally split Canada in half.
Saskatchewan just joined this movement with a nuclear energy announcement that essentially splits Canada down the middle. The western provinces control 75% of national oil production, and they're absolutely done waiting for federal permission to develop their own resources. Doug Ford's Ontario is now partnering with Alberta on energy projects, creating an East-West alliance that completely bypasses Trudeau's climate policies.
It's an economic superpower. I mean, with a GDP of nearly $340 billion.
Numbers don't lie about Alberta's economic importance. This province generates 14% of Canada's entire GDP, while housing only 11% of the population. Without Alberta's contribution, the federal government faces a nearly $20 billion budget shortfall. Yet somehow, Ottawa treats Alberta like a problem child instead of the Golden Goose funding national programs.
Well, I think it's totally achievable for Canada by 2050, in a couple of different ways.
Environmental critics will inevitably scream about carbon emissions, but they're missing the bigger picture entirely. Alberta is already implementing carbon capture technology, direct air capture systems, and net zero oil sands production by 2050, funded and managed without federal involvement.
One is carbon capture utilization and storage. We also know that because we have a decarbonized electricity grid for the most part, we think that we can decarbonize there over a long enough period of time.
The Pathways Alliance represents the largest decarbonization initiative in Canadian history, led by oil sands producers investing their own money in cleaner extraction methods. Irony reaches peak levels when you realize Ottawa imports dirtier oil from authoritarian regimes while blocking cleaner domestic production. Venezuelan heavy crude and Saudi oil apparently pass environmental standards that Alberta's upgraded production somehow fails. Logic takes a holiday when virtue signaling becomes energy policy.
And I think he has to be because it's becoming a problem for him.
Smith gave Ottawa a 6-month ultimatum to support this initiative or stay out of the way entirely. Knowing federal bureaucracy, they'll probably spend those 6 months forming committees to study the environmental impact of forming committees. Alberta isn't waiting around for that circus to conclude. CTA, hit that subscribe button because the next phase of this energy revolution is going to reshape North American economics entirely. And you won't want to miss what happens when the dominoes start falling.
The Premier says the province is actively working to find a private sector partner for a pipeline project out west.
Private sector investment is already flowing into this project because investors recognize stable returns when they see them. Unlike federal infrastructure promises that evaporate after elections, this pipeline deal has binding contracts and profit projections that make financial sense. Real money talks louder than political promises.
Increasing pipeline capacity and oil and gas production in Alberta so that we can play an even greater role in North American energy security.
Cross-border energy integration represents the logical evolution of North American resource development. Mexico's energy sector is struggling, California's grid can't handle summer demand, and American refineries need consistent heavy crude supply. Alberta sits right in the middle of this equation with enough proven reserves to supply continental energy needs for decades.
Also adding in interties with BC and Saskatchewan to be able to bring in nuclear and hydro.
British Columbia's ports become crucial pieces of this puzzle because Asian markets are hungry for reliable energy imports.
We can do the same thing, exporting ammonia to Japan and Korea.
China, Japan, and South Korea are all seeking alternatives to Middle Eastern suppliers, and Alberta's oil sands production offers exactly that stability. Global energy security suddenly makes Canadian resources extremely valuable. Transportation infrastructure determines whether resources generate wealth or collect dust underground. Smith understands that basic economic principle better than federal energy ministers who think good intentions replace actual pipelines. You can't ship oil through regulatory frameworks or environmental assessments. Steel pipes move product, period.
British Columbia's Premier David Eby continues to downplay the idea of a new northern pipeline from Alberta to the coast.
Opposition parties will claim this deal threatens national unity, but I'd argue the opposite is true. When provinces can develop their resources independently, they're less dependent on federal transfers and equalization payments. Alberta's success actually strengthens Confederation by reducing regional economic disparities through market mechanisms rather than government redistribution.
Well, we're talking to all of the pipeline proponents.
Regional cooperation is replacing federal mediation as Western provinces realize they share more interests with each other than with Ottawa. Saskatchewan's nuclear announcement, Alberta's energy corridors, and Ontario's manufacturing partnerships create an economic bloc that functions regardless of federal politics. These provinces are building their own future instead of waiting for permission.
We've seen Western Canada select differential.
International markets don't care about Canadian constitutional jurisdictions. They want reliable energy supplies at competitive prices. Smith positioned Alberta to meet that demand while Ottawa debates whether pipelines align with climate commitments made at international conferences. Guess which approach creates jobs and generates revenue?
I hope the Prime Minister doesn't want to test it because I take it seriously. I have never seen separatist sentiment be as high as it is right now.
Economic sovereignty isn't separatism when provinces develop resources within constitutional frameworks. Alberta isn't leaving Confederation. It's just refusing to let federal politics dictate provincial economic development. Smith is playing constitutional hardball while Trudeau plays climate virtue signaling. And frankly, hardball wins every time.
Now that we are playing in an international space.
But here's what makes this timing absolutely perfect. Global energy markets are in complete chaos right now. European refineries that spent decades relying on Russian crude are desperately scrambling for alternatives. And guess what? Alberta's heavy oil matches their processing specifications better than anything else available. Smith basically positioned Alberta as Europe's lifeline while Putin's regime torched its own energy relationships.
I don't believe that there's a problem committing capacity once the pipeline project is approved.
This strategic alignment with American energy independence couldn't have better timing either. Texas refineries were literally designed for heavy crude processing, making Alberta's oil sands production the perfect fit for continental energy security. While other countries play geopolitical games with energy supplies, North America can actually achieve genuine energy independence through this partnership. What's fascinating is how financial markets are already betting big on this infrastructure shift. Bond investors and pension funds love pipelines because they generate predictable cash flows for decades, unlike those renewable energy projects that depend on government subsidies and favorable weather. Smith's deal offers exactly the kind of stable returns that serious money managers actually want in their portfolios.
But the anchor tenant for this corridor must be a 42-inch pipeline moving 1 million incremental barrels of oil.
Those transportation bottlenecks I mentioned earlier, they're costing Alberta billions annually in discounted oil sales because there's simply nowhere to ship excess production. Smith's corridor eliminates those choke points entirely and captures full market value for Canadian resources. We're literally watching money get left on the table every single day due to federal infrastructure obstruction.
Might take some convincing with BC, and Ottawa has to make good on its promise to build infrastructure.
Speaking of federal obstruction, those constitutional tensions are about to get really interesting. Smith seems perfectly willing to test whether federal jurisdiction over interprovincial infrastructure can override legitimate provincial economic development. If courts side with regional interests over central authority, this pipeline deal could reshape Canadian federalism permanently.
Carbon engineering has returned to Alberta.
Advanced pipeline technology makes all those environmental objections sound increasingly outdated too. Smart sensors, predictive maintenance systems, and automated safety shutoffs reduce environmental risks below what trucking or rail transport can achieve. Smith's incorporating cutting-edge monitoring while critics still argue against 1970s pipeline assumptions.
Anyone who has had success in building a pipeline in Canada and has an interest in perhaps coming together as a consortium.
This pipeline deal represents more than infrastructure development. It's Alberta finally taking control of its own economic destiny. Smith isn't asking permission anymore because she's realized something fundamental. Provinces with resources don't need to beg federal governments for development rights. They just need the courage to build their own future and let Ottawa catch up later. That's exactly what's happening here, And honestly, it's about time someone had the backbone to make this move. Subscribe for more energy politics that actually matter, because this pipeline revolution is changing everything.